वेलकम टू आवर नेशन स्टेट डायलॉग सीरीज राष्ट्र राज्य संवाद श्रृंखला में आपका स्वागत है. I'm Dr. Geeta Kochar, moderator for today's discussion. Today we have a pleasure to invite Major General Rajan Kochar. He was awarded Vashisht Seva Medal in 2015. He retired from the Indian Army as Major General Army Ordnance Corps, Central Command after 37 years of meritorious service. He is a former dean of Noida Institute of Engineering and Technology, where he is currently working as a faculty. He is an alumni of Defense Service Staff College and College of Defense Management, and he obtained his doctorate degree in emotional intelligence and is a reputed expert on logistics and supply chain management. He is a senior advisor to Defense Research and Studies and is a member of Manoj Parrikar Institute of Defense and Strategic Analysis, Center for Joint Warfare Studies, and also a member of USI. Major General Rajan Kochar is a prolific writer and a defense analyst and has published various works and is also an expert commentator on various channels. He has published various works and is also known as an expert commentator relating to various issues on China as well. So today we have invited him to discuss issues on India-China border problem, Chinese BLA, China nexus with neighboring countries, and talk about his latest book, that is Breaking the Chinese Myth, which is very timely addition to Indian scholarship on China. Let me begin by congratulating you for a wonderful work. It was really great to read through your book, many of the portions which I went through, and I found that you have been doing really interesting work in this publication, which is very close to what I do as a research on China. Hence, I'm sure that the discussions that we are going to talk today would be very interesting and informative and would be useful for many of the viewers. So let me first ask you a very basic question, a very broad one. So can you just briefly expound on the book that you have written for our viewers, the contents and the broad ideas for our viewers? In specific, also tell us what is this Chinese myth that you're talking about in the book?
Thank you very much, Dr. Geeta, for inviting me to your channel. It's a great honor for me to be part of this show today. And at the outset, China has always fascinated me whenever I was in service also. I used to closely follow our posture as far as the Chinese threat was concerned. Unfortunately, our thinking was such that we never ever gave importance to China as an adversary. We always considered Pakistan to be our main adversary. And I'm reminded of a statement made by George Fernandez in the parliament once, many years ago, when he said that China is our main adversary. And we need to remember those words. And that was the genesis of writing this book, because I found that the general psyche of our country, we are, to say, overwhelmed by the might of the Chinese. Even while talking to a cab driver, once I was traveling, and his impressions, he said, "Saab, China का कौन मुकाबला कर सकता है? वो इतना ताकतवर है देश. It is such a strong power that it's not possible to match the might of the Chinese." So you can imagine the propaganda the Chinese have been able to achieve in the minds of the people. And it was therefore required to break this myth, which was prevalent all over the world as far as China was concerned. And this was the starting point of mine for writing this. The book is extremely relevant to the present times because it sends a strong message across that 1962 was history. We must forget what has happened in 1962 because the present armed forces is no pushover and cannot be cowed down by the Chinese propaganda of technology and the like. You see in the social media, you read in the Global Times how China is projecting its power. So it's like the story of the David and the Goliath, which should not be actually forgotten. But the Chinese are not 10 feet tall. Our field commanders are capable of beating this challenge. So we need to understand that. My book dwells upon various aspects while we deal with China. The first chapter, we discuss our boundaries and our neighbors. Then we go on to China's emergence as a global power, China's foreign policy, and the wolf warrior diplomacy, the modernization of the PLA and the Indian Army. It's very important to bring out a comparison for the people of the country to understand that we are no pushovers. Some insights into this present conflict, why it happened, and from here, where do we visualize to go, and how soon is it going to end, or is it going to end, or there'll be no end at all. So all these aspects are analyzed in that chapter. And last two chapters deal with requirement of comprehensive defense security strategy, which unfortunately we don't have. And lastly, one of the most important aspects on the Indian defense industry and Make in India. It is very important for us to understand these aspects as a nation and deal with this rogue country, as I call it, China. The Chinese have the impunity to develop their border areas, and unfortunately, we have had a defensive mindset. We have allowed them. We have never objected to it. To match our infrastructure development in the border areas, we have neglected it all over the years. It is only now, since the last about 2 to 3 years, with the present government, that our border areas have started actually getting its importance. The raising of 17 corps to counter the threat of China was an ad hoc exercise. When we projected to the government never agreed to give it the full elements of 17 corps. So the armored element was missing, the artillery element was truncated, and the logistics was truncated. So we really didn't have a potent force to match the Chinese and the LAC. And we therefore need to understand that unless we equip ourselves, strengthen ourselves, and make ourselves strong, it will be difficult to match the Chinese strength. And what happened at Galwan on 15th of June 2020 actually broke the Chinese myth. It actually brought out the might of the Indian soldier. That episode brought out the quality of the Indian soldier. He came about to be an experienced, steadfast, tough, hardy, and highly motivated. And it exposed the weakness of the Chinese soldier. So the myth of the Chinese, they may be superior in technology, but when it comes to a soldier on the ground, because in mountain warfare, it is the domination of heights, the occupation of the ground, and the fighting skills of a soldier which will win you the battle of the day. And we observed that the Chinese one-child policy, later on it became a two-child policy, has badly impacted the psyche of the Chinese soldier. And it is now showing on the ground. And of course, China has now realized it. And you would have actually read in the papers that it is now going to adopt a three-child policy. So that is the psyche of the Chinese, which we have broken. And I needed to actually highlight it to the people of our country. Thank you.
That is very interesting what you pointed out, and that India never considered China as an adversary. And it is now that we are really realizing, I mean, China may be not so very close friend of India. So the kind of tensions that have evolved is really a major issue. And as you just pointed out, about the border issues, then I would want to take you to that position as well. In your book, you have highlighted something about establishing a national border management authority. Now, how will it help India in dealing with border issues, may it be China or Pakistan? Because when we are talking about China, it's the border problem that we are talking about mainly, apart from other issues that you mentioned.
Dr. Geeta, you before I actually come to answering your question, you must first understand the security environment which is prevailing in our country today. We have a very uneasy neighborhood and have boundaries with 7 countries. The land borders are precisely 15,106 kilometers. And out of this 15,000 odd kilometers, 10,000 are with acrimonious neighbors. But towards the west and north, we have unsettled borders, which make the security of our nation very volatile. But towards the east, we have this refugee influx. It's becoming very, very difficult, especially Assam and all of you actually heard about it, to actually control the people who are coming from Myanmar, from Bangladesh, etc. And then, of course, there are issues with Pakistan. We have Jammu and Kashmir. With China, we have Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. And recently with the Nepal, Liphu Lake and Kalapani area. So we have problems in these areas. The infiltration continues to take place. Last 2 years, almost 1,200 incidents of infiltration have taken place. How do we control it? What are the forces which are there, which are manning our borders today? We have the Indian Army, we have the BSF, we have the ITBP, we have the Assam Rifles, and we have the SSB. Now, are these forces operating in a coordinated manner? Is our collection of intelligence taking place in a coordinated manner? Are we able to react timely to any incident which takes place on the border? these are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Taking a look at the maritime domain, we have a maritime boundary of 7,500 kilometers with 6 countries. You will be surprised to know there are 15 agencies which are looking after the maritime boundary. The smuggling and movement of goods by the sea is unabated today. The drug trafficking and all these incidents are actually known to us. So, in my view, we require an agency like the National Border Management Agency to coordinate the security of not only the land borders, but the maritime borders. You will also be interested to learn that the Home Ministry today has a border management division, and it has 4 verticals: Coast Guard vertical, BSF vertical, Indian Army, and one of the Ministry of Commerce. And each vertical is headed by a colonel rank officer. That is about it. So you can understand that at such a lower level, we have created an agency which has actually no powers, no information is flowing, nobody is reacting. So unless we have this actually agency in place, and what are the advantages we'll get? Correct allocation of resources, identification of vulnerable areas, timely dissemination of intelligence inputs, correct placement of surveillance devices, use of satellite imagery, and real-time activation of assets to counter a threat. Unless we do that, we will continue to have repeats of Kargil, Pulwama, Galwan, and Doklam. And of course, all these incidents of terrorist attacks which have taken place in Pathankot, etc. So that is why, Geeta, I think there is a requirement to have such agency, and so this is my view.
No, very well said. I fully agree with you. I mean, we really need a coordinated effort to deal with our borders, and especially considering that we have constant infiltration, we have cross-border terrorism. We have been facing all these issues for past 70, 80 years. I mean, it's nothing new. Since independence, we are constantly dealing with all of these issues. And so there needs to be, a mechanism where coordination between all the stakeholders and the, actors are there, which can really make a better thing. But let me go back to what you were just mentioning before in terms of the PLA, where you have one-child policy, and now, of course, they have changed it to three-child policy, and that is really where the weakness of the Chinese lie. I mean, in your book, you have done some in-depth comparison between the Chinese PLA and the Indian Army. So can you please give a brief understanding for our viewers, especially for those who have hesitancy about Indian Army? You just mentioned that, Chinese could understand what is Indian military power, the soldier power, basically. And so there are these Chinese myths which have been broken in the recent incident of the Ladakh. Having talked about that, especially when we had the entire winter season which went through, and the Indian soldiers could sustain because of the experience that they have. So also, what are the problems that the Indian Army at the Chinese border have to deal with, or what are the challenges that they are facing?
Dr. Geeta, is a very interesting question, and it's very important also in this entire context. India is growing military power, as is evident with a number of nations seeking to enhance military ties with India. Okay, take for example USA, France, South Korea, Japan, Australia, Vietnam, and Israel, to name a few countries. I'll just sort of give you an example. Why they want to align with India? Because they see in India a growing military power. The renaming of the Asia Pacific by the US as Indo-Pacific also indicates the changing dimensions and importance of India in the Indian subcontinent. India is ranked fourth out of 140 countries with regard to the overall military strength. It is the fourth largest army in the world. The strength of the army is 13.5 lakhs, Army, Air Force, and Navy. So we have more than 2,000 aircrafts in our arsenal. 26% of these are fighter aircraft. So we have TAC Hepters. So we have transport aircraft. And as far as the Indian Army is concerned, approximately 5,000 tanks, 10,000 armored fighting vehicles, towed artillery is in excess of 4,000. So the Indian Navy, we are amongst very few countries which has an aircraft carrier. We have destroyers, we have frigates, we have corvettes. So you name it, the state-of-the-art weaponry is there with the Indian Army. And if you see today how we are modernizing, we have got Rafale, which is going to be a game changer. The ultralight howitzers from the USA were deployed in Ladakh. The Pinaka, a multi-launcher, has recently been upgraded. India has its own medium gun now, Dhanush, which is better than Bofors. The BrahMos missiles, the Akash missiles, Agni 5 missile, which can target all major cities of China. And from the US, we have recently got the Apache and Chinook Hepters, enhancing the attack Hepter capability of the armed forces. From Russia, the S-400 missile anti-defense system is also coming. We have upgraded the basic weapon of the infantry soldier. The Segwar rifle and the Kalashnikov rifle is there with us now. And recently you would have heard the news report about the K9 Vajra, the howitzer tracked vehicle also coming into the Indian Army. So we are a strong army today, and therefore the standoff with China has not escalated, because China understands the might of this army. It understands the force level. Can you imagine that within 3 months, our logistics was built up on Ladakh to match the Chinese in terms of manpower, in terms of equipment, in terms of firepower. Our Air Force airfields are located at high altitudes, which is unlike the Chinese. We can go deep into Chinese without actually refueling. So all these aspects actually play an important role. And now we have understood the importance of technology, especially the disruptive technologies are also being adopted by the Indian Army. We are adopting artificial intelligence, big data analytics, robotics, blockchain, and so on. And also, a new air defense command has been announced, and a defense cyber agency is also coming up. So you can see the overall scenario where the Indian armed forces is placed. With regard to the second part of your question now, at the China border, there are numerous challenges being faced today. The Indian Army is well entrenched with the built up trenches there, defenses duly reinforced. The entire dumping of ammunition, FOL, supplies, and water has been complete. The first and the most important challenge is the survivability of the troops in such a high altitude with low temperature. Temperatures actually go down to minus 30 degrees there. It's a harsh terrain. And if you actually go there, even spending a couple of days, and you can imagine the Indian Army is already spent more than a year there. But the troops go through 3 stages of acclimatization. Right. One is at 9,000 feet. The next is at 12,000 feet. And finally at 18,000. There is a requirement of specialized winter clothing. Chilblains, frostbites are very, very common there. Pulmonary edema and all these things are taking place. So we have to clothe ourselves in a manner that we can combat the harsh terrain there. So that is the biggest challenge. The second is the movement of logistics. You will understand that from the month of May to September, this entire period is closed down. So the logistics can only move 6 months in a year. From September onwards, you close down, and up to May next year, you are closed. The passes, the Zojila Pass, Paralacha Pass, Tangla, Changla, Khardungla. So these passes are only open 6 months in a year. So this is only a window available to us for the replenishment to the troops, and that is our second biggest user challenge. There is a challenge of the air replenishment also. On account of the rarefied temperature there, the payloads get reduced. And the time available for flying, due to the inclement weather, you can only fly from 0500 hours to 1200 hours. After 1200 hours, the weather packs up there. So you can imagine that even if we have to carry out air replenishment, it is an issue in those areas. So what is the way ahead now? These are the challenges we face there. So the way ahead is to create a permanent habitat there. We have to create an environment and infrastructure where we can have our own population staying there. Apart from the army staying there, we need to have an habitat there. We need to build up barracks for the Indian Army where our troops can be comfortably placed. Cantonments have to come up in those areas. Roads have to be improved. Bridges have to come up. Helipads have to come up. Upgradation of the airfields have to take place. So these are major challenges for us in these areas. And unless our infrastructure improves there, we will continue to have this problem. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, salute to the soldiers who were, there for all the winters with this harsh weather, temperatures falling 30 or minus 30 or minus 50 degrees or something like that. I mean, we can have this peaceful sleep because of these soldiers. But having talked about that, I mean, the constraints that we face, and yet, we are able to deal with the adversary. We often hear something about PLA's theater commands, So for our viewers, I mean, we just want to have an elaboration about what are these 5 theater commands of PLA. And last year, we are amidst, body tension, we were constantly talking about, that General Chang Shui-Tong, who was appointed as the new commander of the Western Theater Command, replacing General Chao Zongqi. So how do you see this having an impact on our negotiations with the Chinese when we talk about resolving the border dispute or finding, a ground where we can have a common understanding? So what is that we expect for the future?
Very interesting question, Dr. Geeta. I'll take you back in time. During the period 2015 and 16, the PLA carried out a major military force structuring and reorganization. As part of the process, they changed the organization from 7 military regions to 5 geographic theater commands. The Eastern Command coming up at Nanjing, the Southern Command at Guangzhou, the Western at Chengdu, the North at Shenyang, and the Central at Beijing. The basic idea was to create a theater where a theater commander will have the entire resources in terms of firepower with him. They also created, along with these theaters, a PLA strategic support force for the asymmetric warfare in EW, cyber and space, and raise the PLA rocket force, replacing the erstwhile 2nd Artillery. The Chinese realized that the future wars are going to be missile based. The war may not actually take place. It may end before the start only with a overpowering of a missile bombardment. So that was the entire concept. And this raising of the Western Theater Command in 2016 was done under the leadership of General Jiang Hudong, who has now been replaced by General Zhou Zhenghai. The Western Theater Command is the largest theater in terms of its geographical area, and it has the strategic support forces and the PLA rocket force under its command. General Jiang, he was the former second in command of the Central Military Region, a very important man. He was responsible for the security of Beijing. And he was also instrumental, if you remember, for the Doklam. In 2017, he was there. He is actually known as a very ruthless kind of a general. And he is already was reaching the age of 65 years, and he was due for a change. And that is why he has been replaced, and he has been honored now with a new assignment, a very prestigious one, as the deputy chairman of the influential Foreign Affairs Committee of the National People's Congress, the country's parliament. So this is a routine affair, and let us not draw any more conclusions out of it. On the Indian side also, our co-commanders have also been turned over. Lieutenant General Harinder was replaced by General Menon. So all these are routine issues. And as far as the impact on the negotiation is concerned, please remember that this is not a localized standoff. It is a part of the larger Chinese design against India for very reasons, as has been speculated in the media. The strategic guidance of the negotiations are being conducted at the highest level. From the Chinese, it is the Chinese president, and as far as India is concerned, it is the PMO. So I do not think with the change of commanders, there would be any impact on the outcome of the negotiations. Thank you.
So we were talking about this East India, and the media is constantly talking about, but media is also constantly talking about the true foreign war. I mean, the war that we have to face from China as well as Pakistan, the nexus that they had. But the newly emerging scenario we see in the neighborhood is the nexus between China, Pakistan, and Nepal. So given our deep-rooted military ties with Nepal, how does the Chinese play out in the neighborhood, especially as we hear reports, of the Nepalese soldiers, plans of Nepalese soldiers being inducted in the PLA. So how do you see that, changing the scenario?
See, I want to clear certain amount of misconception which is there in the media today. Let us look at it objectively. Historically, Pakistan and China have both been inimical towards India. We both have unresolved boundaries. We have gone to war with both of them. And we have a long history of both these countries acting against India's interest individually and in collusion with each other. With regard to your question of two-front threat, it is actually visualizing a contingency of simultaneous and complementary military action on the western and the northern borders, as well as China and Pakistan acting in concert with each other against India. In other asymmetric domains, it is by supporting terrorism and insurgency, information warfare, cyber domain, and so on. So we are talking here of a real multi-domain threat. For the armed forces, this entails planning for the allocation and deployment of Indian troops and resources along the two fronts simultaneously, and this has become a reality, and we have to prepare ourselves for this. With regard to your question about the nexus with Nepal, it's absolutely a different story, and it actually gets into the domain of political jostling. A small neighbor sandwiched between two large competing neighbors, with its political leaders harboring aspirations in the world of growing opportunities. You see what Nepal is trying to get the maximum leverage from India as well as China. We may be having a political differences with Nepal, and the recent dispute at the tri-junction of the Kalapani area. But beyond that, Nepal is not going to become a third front as far as we are concerned. Pakistan agencies have actually used Nepal for their terrorist activities. China is using it for its BRI activities. And of course, the economic aid which China is giving to Nepal. However, we do not visualize considering our relations with Nepal to actually have it as a threat to us. As regards the Gurkha soldiers, we have 30,000 Gurkha soldiers in the Indian Army. Likewise, we have Gurkha soldiers also joining the British Army. This is a part of a long-standing tripartite agreement between the three countries. According to a study by the IDSA about 4 years back, it is estimated that the Gurkha regiments remit almost $1 billion a year to Nepal. And with the pension and arrears making up another 800 million. So, considering the economic payoffs, also the religious, cultural, and emotive links we have over the years, we should not actually consider Nepal as a threat. And to the best of my knowledge, there are no Gurkha regular troops serving the PLA. Yes, the Chinese ambassador to Nepal sponsored a think tank-led study last year to understand the motivations that attract the Gurkha soldiers to serve the Indian Army. This did draw a lot of attention. Beyond that, I really do not know of any Nepalese being in the PLA.
Yeah, as of now, I mean, I also know that there's nothing of that sort of relationship between the Chinese PLA or the Nepalese army. But really, I mean, the kind of tensions that developed in the last year really created some kind of not just a political, consciousness, but even at the military level, we were a bit shocked about how Nepalese are trying to do. I mean, if the political leaders sell themselves, or as you said, their aspirations are quite high, then there would be a kind of rebalancing they're going to do with India and China. But let's move back to our last question and just about the Chinese side as well. I mean, Chinese have a saying that 500 wars to win. I mean, you fight a war, 100 wars, and you win 100 wars, or you do not engage in a war but you win the war. Considering these philosophies of China, what is India's strategy to win over China without engaging in a war? I mean, considering that we are yet to fully negotiate the border issue and return to the status quo ante, how we are going to really deal with the Chinese when we were almost at the face of was like almost at the very crucial junctures where anything could have happened. Yet, of course, we had this chance not to escalate to real war. But what are the chances, or what are the strategies that we have for future?
See, if you go back to the kind of peace we were enjoying with China over the years, it started with visit of Rajiv Gandhi to China in 1988, where we arrived at an agreement to manage the disputed borders. And we signed agreements with them in 1993, 1996, 2005. And we also evolved various border management mechanisms. And over the past 4 decades, without fighting, there was peace and tranquility. At the same time, we also managed investments and trade with China. This entire thing has been shattered last year. What happened in Eastern Ladakh? The Indian strategy has been to hold LAC firmly and adopt an offensive defense, carry out quid pro quo where required, and to calibrate the deployments and posture along the LAC. This has been the strategy of the Indian government at the LAC so far. We have strengthened our ISR capabilities. We have adequate deterrence in place. Despite the agreements and what has happened, we have maintained the sanctity at the border. Large number of interaction and communication is on. 11 Corps commander level talks have taken place. There was a meeting in Moscow in September last year also. And we are respecting each other's buffer zones, and we are not trying to trigger any unnecessary action at the border. While preparing ourselves militarily, we have also taken actions in the other domains, banning the Chinese apps, greater scrutiny of the Chinese investments, restricting induction of Chinese equipment into our critical infrastructure, keeping them out of 5G, etc. As also our political leaders have not pointedly named and blamed China to prevent triggering the sensitivities. So it is beyond me to actually articulate what would be the right strategy. But I can actually say a prudent strategy would be to keep our military preparedness, stick on, not divorcing boundary and other bilateral issues of relationship, keep China out of technology and the critical projects, strengthen our strategic partnership. The Quad is actually coming up, and Quad is a major irritant as far as China is concerned. So we must keep up all these issues as far as our strategic partnership is concerned. As regards the restoring of the status quo ante, April 2020, well, this has been restored in the north and south banks of Pagongsu. And the negotiation for the restoration of Depsang, Hot Springs, and Gogra are still underway. When and how it will be achieved, I think it's anybody's guess. We can only hope and pray that in times to come, the Chinese withdraw and move back to their designated areas. Thank you.
Yeah, very rightly said. I mean, we need to continue our dialogue with the Chinese, and of course, no border unless until there's a border solution, our economic and trade ties are going to be, hampered. But at the same time, we should not be lowering our guards. With that words, it was a great pleasure interacting with you. Hope we continue our discussion on many such related topics. Thank you very much, and to our viewers, keep learning, keep watching our programs. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Geeta. It was a pleasure to be part of it.